Honourable members, the prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King, to his government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Amen. Honourable members, it being the last sitting day of the week, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the King by Ms. Ashley Stevenson.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Please be seated.
Introduction of visitors.
Honourable members, there are a lot of people that work very hard behind the scenes so that members can do important work for the people of Alberta. Sadly, we will be saying goodbye to one of the hardest working members of the LAO team. Don DeChamplain is an officer with the Legislative Assembly Security Service, having served in his capacity there for the last 5 years. But prior to joining the LASS team, Don was a 30-year veteran of the Edmonton Police Service, where he served in a variety of roles, including with the gang unit, drug unit, auto theft trap team, and alerts surveillance squad. Don personifies what it means to be an LASS officer, balancing a friendly, welcoming disposition with the toughness needed to ensure that Alberta's legislature remains a safe place for Albertans to visit and for members and staff to work. I was able to join his LASS colleagues earlier today to celebrate Don's retirement, and it was obvious what a valuable member of the LASS family Don is and was. On behalf of all members of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, LAO staff, and your colleagues, thank you for your incredible service. We'll miss you. I ask that all members please provide Don the warm welcome of the Assembly. Honourable members, also joining us today in the Speaker's Gallery as part of Don's retirement celebration, I have the pleasure of introducing members of Don's family. I'd like to introduce Don's wife, herself, an inspector with the Edmonton Police Service, Shannon DeChamplain. She's joined by their daughters, Kyla, Sydney Taylor, and Taylor's fiancé, David Elliott. I ask that they would rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Also my pleasure to introduce some friends of mine, and if you've been around the legislature for long enough, you may also be their friend, or at least be very well aware of them. Mr. Peter and Christina Pulowski, their sons Bartek and Jacob Pulowski, and Shirley Neves. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. Go ahead with guests.
Introduction of guests.
The honourable member for Calgary Falconridge has a school to introduce, I believe.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly, Santosh Dal, a distinguished Annapolis Canadian entrepreneur, community leader, and advocate. His many achievements include appointment as the Tourism Envoy of Nepal to Canada by the Government of Nepal and Vice President of Association of the Annapolis in America. Now I ask Santosh to please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to introduce to you and through you to all members some special guests. Jeff Davison, the CEO of the Prostate Cancer Centre, Terry Kirkland, President of Prostate Edmonton Peer Support, Don Cherna, Stacy Smith, and Les Anidi McClellan. They are here today to recognize the critical importance of equitable service across this province, something we can all agree on. And I would ask these visitors to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The honourable member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and introduce to you and through you Ms. Maureen Purvis. Maureen and her husband Randall are the driving force behind No Stone Left Alone, a memorial foundation that helps honor fallen service members. Their purpose is to honor, educate, and help Albertans remember the importance of the sacrifices of our soldiers, Air Forcemen, and our naval personnel. I invite her to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
We have one donation. The honourable member for Edmonton Glenora.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise and introduce to and through you Tracy Giroux, who's one of the hardest working volunteers I've ever had the honour to be on the doorsteps with. She's certainly not afraid of snow or rain or sleet, and she's such a great ally to have. And I also see Chris Galloway, who's visiting with Friends of Medicare in the gallery. Please both rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the guests were introduced, but I also want to recognize Peter Pilarski, Christina Pilarski, their sons Bartek and Jacob, and Shirley Nieves. I want to thank Peter and Christina for being incredible constituents and volunteers in their community, and thank Peter as well for dragging me to the top of a mountain a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for all that you do. You're very much appreciated.
The honourable member for Lesser Slave Lake. Do you have an introduction, or you're okay? The honourable member for St. Albert, followed by Calgary Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you and through you Carly Drew, Daniel Emmett, Aaron Novakowski, who are advocates for better home care, who are accompanied by parents, friends, and partners who support them, Susan and Michael DeRocher, Jared Verkaman, Ryan Lemoyne, Frederick Croach, Nicholas Mitchell, and Rebecca Campbell. Would they please rise if they're able and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly?
The honourable member for Calgary Bennington has an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you my favorite four constituents of Calgary Bennington, my family, my reason, my why. Jonathan, Lizzie, Oliver, Arthur, please rise and receive the warm welcome.
The honourable member for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Thank you. I rise to introduce to you and through you two of my constituents and amazing advocates, one who needs two introductions, Chris Galloway and Alyssa Preddy from Friends of Medicare. Please join me and give them a very warm welcome.
Are the honourable member for Calgary Klein.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce to you and through you my loving partner and favorite door-knocking buddy, Todd. He is a musician and teacher in Calgary and makes the lives of young people great. So please join me in giving them the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Yeah.
Are there others? Seeing none.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The honourable member for Calgary Curry has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, the Calgary Board of Education celebrated 50 years of French immersion programming. The very first year of students to enroll in the program were at McDougall School in downtown Calgary in 1973, and the number of children has grown exponentially since then. Clearly, when we provide options within public education, families take them, and the system for all of us becomes stronger as a result. Today, nearly 10,000 students in 24 schools across the CBE are proud to learn their core subjects in French, while there are another 11 schools in the Calgary Catholic School District. The CBE lists the many benefits of learning French as a young person. These include enhanced listening, learning, and problem-solving skills, and a notable improvement in the facility to learn additional languages. It may even pave the way, Mr. Speaker, to a life in politics, something I can attest to, because I am a product of the Calgary Board of Education's French immersion system, and my eldest daughter is too. I am proud to speak both of our national languages, and am thankful for the sense of pluralism and federalism it instilled in me. And so I'd like to send a message to the children attending French immersion in Calgary Curry, those at Westgate Elementary, St. Mike's, and Holy Name. J'espère que vous avez passé un joyeux mois de la francophonie et que vous avez eu la chance de célébrer l'anniversaire de l'immersion française. Comme vous autres, j'ai fréquenté une école d'immersion française moi-même, dès la maternelle jusqu'aux 12e année. Je sais que ce n'est pas toujours facile de parler français, mais courage, les amis. Le fait que vous apprenez le français va vous donner des opportunités d'ouvrir des portes qui vont fleurir vos futurs projets. Les possibilités d'emploi, de voyage et d'échanges culturels sont nombreux et bénéfiques. Finalement, aux enseignants, merci pour tous vos efforts pour créer un environnement d'apprentissage plaisant, sain et sécuritaire. Merci beaucoup.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Wapiti has a statement to make.
Mr. Speaker, today is a good day for Alberta and a great day for Alberta seniors. Our UCP government is delivering on its campaign promise to provide seniors a 25% discount on personal registry services starting April 1st, 2024. This discount on registry services will help make life more affordable for seniors in our province. It was developed in collaboration with our private registries. This will provide relief to seniors, many of whom are on a fixed income and have a difficult time making ends meet. Currently, there are more than 700,000 seniors, and by 2035, there will be more than 1 million Albertans aged 65 and older in our province. We are committed to making seniors' lives better. In fact, our low-income seniors receive some of the highest financial benefits in the country. Alberta Budget 2024 includes additional funding to the Seniors Lodge Assistance Program with an increase of 55% in funding per person per day. This benefit was indexed by 4.25% to keep pace with inflation, and as of April 1st, when Alberta seniors go to the registry office, they will get a 25% discount on services like driver's license, registration renewals, disability placards, and driving records, just to name a few. Seniors are an important pillar of our communities, and with their hard work and contribution to our society will not be ignored. Our seniors have guided us all to where we are today, and they have made a tremendous impact on the foundation of families, friendships, and touched countless lives over the years. Our government is listening and acting on the increased concerns on affordability from our seniors. And by listening to Albertans, we will continue to make the changes that will make life more affordable, secure Alberta as the best place to live, grow, and age. While Trudeau makes my life more expensive for everyone, the Alberta government is providing relief for our seniors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary-Bennington has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Choice. It's the UCP's favorite dog whistle in education. But what does choice in education mean? Are we talking about choice in school systems, or do we mean choice in programming? We know that the majority of parents in Alberta choose public education for their children. And when you take a look at what kind of programs are offered in public education, it's no wonder why. Language programs in French, Mandarin, ASL, Hebrew, Spanish, and German. Academic programs like GATE, AP, and IB. There's a boys' school, a girls' school, traditional learning centers, Indigenous-focused schools, Montessori programs. You can homeschool or learn online. There are options for dual credit and off-campus education. There are schools for pregnant and parenting teens. Students with diverse learning needs are welcomed here. There are programs for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. There are adapted learning programs for students with low adaptive behavior functioning. Paced learning for students with mild intellectual development disorders. There are schools to serve students with learning disabilities that specifically impact reading acquisition. There are STEM schools, science schools, sports schools, and art schools. And the doors of public education, well, they welcome every single child. And they accommodate that child, supporting, encouraging, and mentoring each and every child who enters that system. The success stories from Alberta's public education system are countless. I am a proud supporter of Alberta's public education system, and together, we need to work together to build, support, and strengthen it. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cypress Medicine Hat is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. April 1st is an important day. It marks the centennial anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force. This marks a century of unparalleled service, dedication to our great nation. This milestone not only honors the rich legacy of the RCAF, but it also pays tribute to the countless men and women who have served bravely. Their professionalism, skills, and selflessness exemplify the values that have guided the Royal Canadian Air Force through its history. Whether at home or abroad, they stand ready to defend our nation's safety, security, promoting international peace, and upholding global stability. The RCAF remains steadfast in its commitment to excellence and innovation. By having a strong vision for the future, they are preparing to grow and adapt, and will continue to watch over our tomorrows. This centennial year, we've seen them reaffirm their commitment to our country with pride, professionalism, and integrity. For us, it's a time to honor the sacrifices of those who have come before us and rededicate ourselves to the noble cause which the RCAF was founded on. To the brave servicemen and women stationed in Cold Lake or at the Helicopter Squadron in Edmonton, I want to thank you. To our veterans, our service members, and their families, thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice, your dedication, and your unwavering commitment to duty. In honor and recognition of the men and women who have and continue to serve Canada both at home and abroad, and in recognition of the positive impact the RCAF has had worldwide, I invite everyone to illuminate your residences, your places of business, your public buildings in blue to show support on April 1st for the Royal Canadian Air Force. Share your pictures on social media using the hashtags RCAF100 and hashtag 100 Years of Flying Blue to help honor the Royal Canadian Air Force as they attempt to break a Guinness World Record. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton-Decore has a statement.
Mr. Speaker, settlement and immigration in Canada is shared responsibility between the federal and provincial governments. In 2023, Canada experienced a record high of new immigrants, with Alberta ranking as 4th province with the highest international migration. Projections for 2024 suggest that international migration will continue to be robust, with Alberta also witnessing significant interprovincial migration. Immigrants are the key driver of growth in our labour force, and their ability to thrive directly impacts our economy. It is imperative for this government to enhance support systems, facilitate settlement, integration, and the success for the newcomers. Settlement organizations in the province continue to express that existing support systems are failing to keep pace with the growth in immigration. Settlement agencies continue to face mounting waitlists for language assessment and support. Unemployment rates among the new immigrants are on the rise, while their labour force participation rates are declining. The proportion of new immigrants in shelter spaces is on the increase, highlighting the urgency of the situation. The lack of adequate support system threatens the ability of newcomers to settle, contribute, and thrive in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, the current state of settlement and immigration in Alberta demands immediate action. It's crucial to bolster support systems that enable successful integration and contributions to the society. The UCP government must allocate the much-needed funding to support settlement services. This includes expanding language assessment and support programs and clear the backlog of waitlists. The government should implement measures to address the rising unemployment rates among newcomers. Mr. Speaker, I call this government to take decisive actions in addressing the challenges facing new immigrants. As a province, we must ensure that Alberta remains a vibrant and welcoming.
The honourable member for Calgary-Klein.
Today I rise belatedly to recognize the International Day for the Right to Truth concerning gross human rights violations and for the dignity of victims. This day was recognized by the United Nations in honor of Monsignor Romero, an archbishop who was assassinated after giving Mass in El Salvador on March 24, 1980. This day marks a dark time for the Salvadoran community, but is observed with great love. In Pope Francis' words, Romero's ministry was distinguished by his particular attention to the most poor and marginalized. Monsignor Romero was killed after calling for a stop to the atrocities being committed by right-wing death squads, an overwhelming fear that had seized El Salvador through the 80s and 90s. As a Catholic kid already passionate about social justice, his story made an impression on me. My parents came to Alberta before the Civil War started in earnest, and the next decade was spent trying to bring more relatives here to safety. We would get phone calls from panicked family members not sure if they would make it through the week, telling stories of the human cruelty they'd witnessed on their doorsteps. I recently met a fellow Salvadoran who remarked, "People who come here fleeing war aren't just trying to start a new life. They have trauma and are trying to heal." I think often of this as I speak to folks who have chosen to make Alberta their new home, and in particular refugees I've met that are fleeing war, persecution based on their identity, racism, and genocide. It's also not lost on me that we have much work to do here in regards to truth and reconciliation, the protection of human rights, and to make our communities truly inclusive. As the first and only currently elected person in Canada of Salvadoran descent, it's important to me to recognize this day and to remember that the work of defending human rights is never easy and it is never done. Queremos ser la voz de los que no tienen voz para gritar contra tanto atropello contra los derechos humanos. Thank you.
Yeah.
Honourable members, for the purposes of the official record, the honourable member did provide the translation in Spanish for all members. Honourable members, it is now 1:50, and that makes it oral question period. And the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition has question 1.
Mr. Speaker, the UCP claim their motel medicine scandal has nothing to do with health care. Now, while many others had similar stories, Mr. Caniff was the first person we heard of. He was receiving care in a hospital, and while being discharged from that hospital, a worker in the hospital gave him a list of continuing care options. He ended up in a roadside motel until having to return to the emergency room in the hospital and being readmitted to the hospital. So, to the Premier, how can she and her ministers claim that this horrible situation has nothing to do with health care?
The Honourable the Premier has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day, AHS has to make decisions to discharge patients. So at our largest hospitals, that's 500 patients a day, and across the entire system, it's 1,000 patients per day. In this particular case, the individual clearly thought that they were going to a long-term care facility. They weren't. They went to a hotel. It was inadequate to serve his needs. He ended up back in hospital, and we launched an investigation. We found 27 individuals in a similar circumstance who all needed to be provided various levels of support, and every one of them is now in an appropriate facility.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the minister herself admitted that many motel patients received EMS and nursing care last weekend. Yet their internal investigations are not reviewing the health care implications of this scandal. They're not dealing with the discharge policy from the hospital or the list provided in the hospital by hospital staff, both of which they're still refusing to release publicly. So, again to the Premier, why is there no independent public health care-based investigation into motel medicine, and why will she not release the discharge policy and the list provided to patients?
Yes. The Honourable the Premier has risen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In point of fact, we are reviewing the discharge policy. Yesterday, my ministers met and went through looking at what the different steps are. There is a step that is missing. It's a gap that the minister has identified, that when somebody is being discharged and they don't have family to go home to, they don't have a home to go home to, that's the point where seniors community social services or mental health and addiction need to step in order to make sure that they find an appropriate care facility. The reason why we're not having an Alberta Health Quality Council investigation is they declined. They actually said it would be redundant since there's already 3 other investigations going on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, none of those are about health care, according to the minister. Meanwhile, reinforcing silos and denying the continuum of care is what creates the cracks in the system through which people fall. Albertans deserve the right care in the right place at the right time. I've even heard the minister herself say this. Putting a fence around the hospital and denying that health care happens outside of it is exactly the wrong approach. So again, to the Premier, why is her government refusing to do an independent public health care based review of motel medicine?
The The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I guess I have to agree with the Leader of the Opposition. We have to make sure that there aren't silos, and we have to make sure that the patient is treated in the right place at the right time with the right care persons. And this is part of the problem that we've had, is we've had anywhere up to 1,500 patients per day who need to be in alternative levels of care. So that's why we are working across ministry to identify places for them to go, whether it's continuing care, long-term care, whether it's mental health and addiction, whether it's home care supports, or whether it's the care of a family. So we are tearing down those silos, and we're going to make sure everyone gets the right treatment.
Right. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition for a second set of questions.
Talking about independent reviews, Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Premier spoke at a federal political rally to tell the crowd, to tell NDP leadership candidates, to tell me, to tell Jagmeet Singh, to tell the Prime Minister to spike the so-called hike at gas pumps.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Speaker, it just doesn't need to be that complicated because this Premier has her very own hike. She can spike.
Order.
Fuel tax hike on April 1st.
Yes.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that there are different types of taxes. Our fuel tax pays for roads. Even the federal 10-cent a litre tax pays for roads. What doesn't pay for anything is what's going to be a 17-cent a litre carbon tax that comes in on April 1st, or the tax on tax that happens with the GST. Yep. The federal government has 35 cents a litre as of April 1st that is going to go into the price of gasoline and diesel. We took the fuel tax off for 2 entire years, saving Albertans $2.5 billion. Yep. We will remove that tax again if prices go up, and we'd ask the federal government to do the same.
The order. The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we know there are things about the federal tax that's far from fair, but at least it comes with an increase to the rebate. That is unlike her fuel tax hike, which does not fix roads. It goes...
Order. The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Her fuel tax hike does not go to fix roads. It goes to general revenue, from which the Premier has wasted nearly $400 million in health care boondoggles alone. So to the Premier, instead of wasting money on trying to privatize health care, why not use that money to fix roads and on April 1st save Albertans $430 million by spiking her own hike?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a little awkward to hear the current leader defend the carbon tax when the future leader sounds like they don't want to have the carbon tax anymore. Mr. Speaker, we have a policy in place that as soon as WTI prices go above $80, that's when we take off a portion of the tax. When it goes up above $90, we'll take the tax off completely. Albertans know that that is what we're monitoring at the moment. The WTI price is slightly above 80, slightly below. We made a promise that we were going to run balanced budgets, and we're going to make sure that that promise is kept.
The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition has the call.
The only promise this government has kept is actually to increase taxes by $430 million starting April 1st. And you know what? There is only one taxpayer, and Albertans deserve a break. We've been hit with the largest...
Order. Might not like the question, but the member has the right to ask it. The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Albertans have been hit with the largest rental increases in the country, the slowest wage growth, the highest utility rate growth, and the highest inflation rate overall. Being forced to pay $430 million more at the pumps is the last thing they need. So again to the Premier, this is a problem she can solve herself.
Order. The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition is the only one with the call.
This is a promise and a problem that the Premier can solve herself. Why won't she spike her own $430 million tax tax increase on April 1st.
Yes.
The Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's so many problems that they created that we now have to fix. I mean, why do we have problems with the utility rates? It's because they rushed to phase out coal without a plan to bring on new baseload power. Our Minister of Affordability and Utilities is solving that problem. We've got 2,700 megawatts of natural gas coming on this year. I should say as well, when they were in power, we had 13 quarters of out-migration. Their plan was to go to BC to get a job. We brought in migration, and as a result, I'm pleased to report we have the highest level of housing starts ever. We're going to be able to solve that rental housing price problem soon.
Order. The Honourable, the member for Calgary Falconridge.
Mr. Speaker, dozens of Alberta seniors and their families are owed millions of dollars by an Edmonton area landlord. Yesterday in this Assembly, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Service Alberta repeated his talking point that the Life Lease Society was just a Facebook group. However, they incorporated in December and emailed his office to let him know. To the Minister, will you admit that this getting facts like this wrong deepens concerns that you do not take the Life Lease issue seriously?
The Honourable, the Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction.
Mr. Speaker, I do take this Life Lease seriously because this is unfortunate what has happened to these seniors, and I can tell you we did very comprehensive consultations. We met with over 170 Albertans. We even met with the NDP twice, Mr. Speaker, plus we had the bill briefing a third time. But you know who was suspiciously absent from those conversations? St. Albert and Falconridge were nowhere to be found. Mr. Speaker, why is it when there's heavy lifting to be done, you can't find Falconridge or St. Albert anywhere? What a shame.
Order. A point of order is noted at 2:01. The Honourable member for Calgary Falconridge.
Mr. Speaker, given that my colleague from St. Albert tabled an email yesterday from a senior investigator that clearly stated that there is no investigation into funds owed to life leaseholders by Christians and communities, and given that all ministers ought to know what is going on in their departments, especially on sensitive issues like this, will the Minister of Service Alberta admit he doesn't know what's going on in his department and Albertans are right to question his competency?
The Honourable, the Minister of Service Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to tell the member what's going on. We are bringing forward the most comprehensive life lease protections this province has ever seen. We're bringing forward enhanced disclosure, enhanced transparency. We're prescribing timeframes for repayment. And, Mr. Speaker, penalties up to $300,000 and 2 years in jail. If they have so much to say, I would have encouraged them to come to our consultations. Unfortunately, he chose not to show up, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable member for Calgary Falconridge.
Mr. Speaker, given that Alberta seniors and their families are out $54 million from a landlord, and given that they entered into these agreements believing they would provide them with housing stability, but has only brought stress, and given that the Minister refuses to require companies to put the funds into trust, will the Minister admit that Alberta seniors losing their life savings is the exact opposite of affordability?
The Honourable Minister of Service Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell the member again what we did. We are bringing forward the most comprehensive life lease protections this province has ever seen. Enhanced disclosure, enhanced transparency. We're prescribing time payments for payment. And, Mr. Speaker, there's even going to be penalties up to $300,000 in fines and 2 years in jail. The only question I have is why didn't he come to the consultations, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable member for Edmonton South.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to represent communities and families in Edmonton South. Since the UCP has taken over, they have struggled with a lack of family doctors and the UCP's decision to cancel the South Edmonton Hospital. The Premier campaigned on building this hospital, but just as soon as Edmonton rejected the UCP rejected South Edmonton. Why is this government punishing my constituents by cancelling the South Edmonton Hospital, and what is their plan to get the Edmonton South the health care they deserve?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the South Edmonton Hospital was announced, it was by the members opposite, without a feasibility study, without a business plan. Mr. Speaker, in fact, since I've come into office, I've come to understand that all the documentation shows that where a hospital is needed is in the north of Edmonton. So, Mr. Speaker, we will for sure continue to make sure that South Edmonton residents do have the resources that they need. We have lots of opportunities. In fact, we've allocated $88 million in funding to make sure that we have integrated health and social infrastructure.
The honourable member for Edmonton South, and a point of order is noted at 2:05.
Instead of pitting people against each other, we need many hospitals. The UCP's healthcare solution is telling Edmontonians to hit Highway 2. This premier thinks that the solution for Edmontonians is for people to drive through the snow to Red Deer. This premier declared before the election that the UCP health crisis was over, and now tells my constituents that the healthcare they deserve is a 2-hour drive away. Highway healthcare is this health minister's prescription, and Albertans deserve better. Does she really think a 150-kilometer drive is better than building the hospital Edmonton needs for decades?
The order. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans deserve better, and they've gotten better. They chose the UCP, Mr. Speaker, in the last election. So, Mr. Speaker, we do have planning underway for a standalone Stollery Children's Hospital, as well as the redevelopment of the Royal Alexandra.
Order. The Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We do have, as I was saying, the Royal Alexandra Hospital redevelopment, the Westview Hospital Centre, the Strathcona Community Centre, and we're continuing to explore other areas where we can ensure that Albertans, particularly Edmontonians, needs are being met.
The honourable member for Edmonton South.
When the last hospital in Edmonton opened, the premier wasn't even old enough to vote. We now know that Edmonton will be short 1,500 hospital beds, but the UCP solution is to put those hospital patients in cars and send them down the QE2 to a 4-hour round trip for health care. There have been 12 Conservative health ministers since the Grey Nuns opened who watched this health crisis grow and grow. Will the health minister reverse this senseless, cruel decision and build the hospital, or will she become the 13th Conservative health minister who failed Edmonton?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to point to the failures of the members opposite when they were in government. They did not actually have a feasibility study or a business plan when they announced the South Edmonton Hospital. Mr. Speaker, this hospital cost has ballooned to just shy of $5 billion, Mr. Speaker. It would make it the largest, most expensive hospital in all of Canada and would take over a decade to build. Mr. Speaker, we need to do something to provide services in the immediate future, and we are going to do it, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Mr. Speaker, the UCP budget broke its promise to Lethbridge school boards, parents, children, administrators, and support staff. They said that they would take action on school construction. During the election, they patted school boards on the head and said, yeah, we'll get to your construction requests. That did not happen. The Holy Spirit Board has had a St. Francis Middle School modernization or complete rebuild on the capital plan for years. Another UCP budget? No school. Why didn't the minister fund a new downtown Lethbridge Middle School for the Catholic School Board?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite should know, every year all of our school divisions submit their capital requests, and all of those projects are taken into consideration. They are evaluated and scored, and priority projects are then moved forward. We were able to move ahead with a project for the city of Lethbridge. More specifically, we were able to move forward in providing design funding to the Lethbridge School Division for a modernization project that's important for the community. We will absolutely work to ensure that all communities receive modernized and updated schools, Mr. Speaker.
Lethbridge West.
given, Mr. Speaker, there are 11 pending projects between the public and the Catholic boards, given that I know there are UCP MLAs who have toured St. Francis and understand the dire need, and given that the only funds allocated in Budget 24 for the modernization planning of the 110-year-old Galbraith Elementary School, one school, 11 projects, why did the minister justify Lethbridge's needs, justify the neglect of Lethbridge's needs? And why don't we have a new St. Francis Middle School?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, despite rhetoric from the member opposite, we're not neglecting any component or corner of our province. Of course, there are a variety of school projects that need to proceed, both new construction projects, modernization projects. We currently have 98 projects in the pipeline that we are working forward with and developing. Mr. Speaker, those projects will advance to different stages once they've completed the necessary requirements, and we will continue to build schools and modernize schools in every corner of our province, including in the city of Lethbridge.
Honourable Member for Lethbridge West.
Given that this budget also did nothing to fund every child in the system, let alone the educational assistants, admin assistants, custodians, and bus drivers that keep schools working, and given their current wages are incredibly low, in fact, one Southern Alberta educational assistant reports she earns less now than she did 17 years ago, and a Tabor admin assistant says her kids need to work after school so her family can make ends meet. Will the minister give Southern Alberta school boards and other boards across the province the resources they need to improve these working conditions? Is there a specific commitment to school support staff in this budget? I didn't see it, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Well, if the member didn't see it, I encourage the member to look harder, Mr. Speaker. In the budget, we've included a 4.4% increase this year alone to education funding. That, in raw terms, is a $400 million increase to education's operating budget. Over the next 3 years, that investment will increase to $1.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, that's to help fund enrollment growth. In addition, that includes $44 million this year alone to support growing classroom complexity so that school divisions can hire additional EAs to support these dynamics.
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Lougheed has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In just a few days, the federal government will increase the carbon tax on Canadians by 23%. Let that sink in. 23% more. From coast to coast to coast, premiers across party lines are calling for the Justin Trudeau and his government to cancel the increase, but so far, he and the government just aren't listening. Mr. Speaker, our Premier is one of those who have stood up against increasing taxes further on Albertans and Canadians. To the Premier, you were invited to speak to MPs at a parliamentary committee today. Can you tell us what message you brought to Ottawa?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member for the question. The message I brought to Ottawa was that Canadians and Albertans are increasingly desperate because they're facing a cost of living crisis not seen in decades. Families are being forced to make tough decisions just to put food on the table. Businesses are having to make sacrifices just to keep the lights on, and the carbon tax is impacting Canadians disproportionately, and that needs to change. The message I brought to members of the committee is the federal government is going to say that affordability is a top priority, as they have been saying. They can match the words with action and immediately cancel the carbon tax increase.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Lougheed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Premier for her answer and her ongoing advocacy for what's best for Albertans. To steal a few words from my colleague, the member from Red Deer South, this tax increase is very, very bad. Given the carbon tax increases the price of everything, and given it also drives up inflation, which means that Albertans are facing a cost of living crisis not seen in decades, can the Premier tell us what Justin Trudeau's carbon tax increase will cost Albertans and whether or not that is a reasonable demand on Albertans who are already forced to make tough decisions on spending?
Almost sounds like there's a significant preamble in that question. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the federal government's claims that that Canadians will benefit from rebates, the carbon tax on a net basis actually will cost Albertans more than $900 this year. Yep. And to make it worse, because it keeps going up, the cost to each Albertan is going to triple in the next 6 years to a staggering expense of a net $2,700 by 2030. As of April 1st, Albertans will pay around 35 cents in federal fuel taxes on every litre of gas, carbon tax, federal excise tax, and GST. Yep. Meanwhile, the price of natural gas as well, it's going up to $4.05 a gigajoule. That's twice what the cost of gas is.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that Justin Trudeau and his government claim that the only way to reduce emissions is to tax them out of existence, and given this unreasonable and punishing carbon tax increase is only the latest in their irresponsible, unrealistic, and expensive green agenda, and given Alberta is making significant progress on emissions reductions without a carbon tax, can the Premier tell us how we can achieve emissions reduction without compromising jobs and prosperity?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've got a couple of programs, the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program and as well as the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program, that are going to result in billions of dollars of investment in net zero industry. So we've got Air Products, net zero hydrogen, Dow Canada, net zero petrochemical, Inter Pipeline for ammonia, as well as Heidelberg is nearing a decision on net zero cement. The Pathways Group as well is going to build a $16 billion carbon capture pipeline. Capital Power has worked with the Ontario government to establish a working group to figure out how to roll out small modular nuclear. There's lots of great things happening. We don't need an additional tax.
Right. Well, member for Edmonton Meadows.
Mr. Speaker, in the heart of Alberta's promise as a beacon of opportunities, the experience of newcomers under the UCP government are far moved from this ideal. Within my constituency, numerous individuals who have made the decision to immigrate to Alberta, driven by aspirations of stability and prosperity for themselves and their families. But they struggle to find the promised avenues of growth and fulfillment as the UCP's mismanagement of the application process makes their lives more miserable and their dreams wither. Why does this government persist in failing the newcomers who have placed their trust in Alberta's potential?
The Honourable the Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, member, for the question. Our government is doing our best to help our newcomers, our immigrants in this province. And every time I got a question that we're not doing enough, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that in their 4-year term, they did nothing for immigrants, nothing for newcomers, and I'm very happy to be part of this government that has done so much for our newcomers.
The member for Edmonton Meadows.
Mr. Speaker, given that yesterday the Premier and the Immigration Minister requested to the federal government for more control to address its skilled workforce shortage, including increasing Ukrainian evacuees' participation in the job market. Given that, due to this government's incompetence, there is a huge backlog and high processing times for all AAIP streams. And given that the ministry cut funding to newcomer sports services, that will make the bad situation worse. Will the minister promise to reverse all the budget cuts to the funding and change its focus on supporting Alberta's newcomers?
The Honourable the Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am so proud of Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. This program is very competitive, and because of this program, people continue to come to Alberta in massive numbers. Our fees are very competitive with the rest of the country, and in fact, they were revised a few years ago, and all we are trying to do is cover the cost for those fees. And very happy to provide the services under AAIP to our newcomers.
Member for Edmonton Meadows.
Mr. Speaker, recently it has been proven once again that the governments lack transparency and is only doing lip service to address the concerns of newcomers. Given that each application will be only considered as an expression of interest going forward, and given that all the applications to AIP streams will have no standard of methods for being selected in these streams. Wow. My question to the minister is, how and why would Albertan trust this government on a fair selection process in all AIP streams?
The Honourable the Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the questions. Alberta Advantage immigration programs consists of 8 streams. We keep adding new pathways and streams as needed based on the requirements of our economy in this province here. And every stream has its own basic numbers, and we want to make sure that we continue to serve Albertans. But what the member opposite can do is help me to get the higher allocations for this province so that we can have more newcomers here.
Right on.
Here, here, here. Honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
The UCP have failed to support Albertans needing home care. In fact, it goes even further. This government fails to respect home care workers who work tirelessly to support Alberta seniors. Home care aides and personal support workers are among the poorest paid healthcare workers in Alberta, something that this government's lust for privatization won't address. Today, I will table a petition signed by over 33,000 Albertans calling on this government to improve the quality of home care services in Alberta. Will the minister listen to these concerns and act on this today?
The Honourable the Minister of Health has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We already have, because the truth of the matter is that we're supporting Albertans each and every day. Budget 2024 invests a total of nearly $860 million, which is an increase of $27 million over last year for home care. We are investing over $1 billion over 3 years to transform the continuing care system, which includes significant funding to expand home and community care services and supports. Home and community care services and supports. We're expanding those. So yes, we are doing what we said we were going to do.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Given that I was joined today by a validator named Daniel Ennett, who said, and I quote, "Recently, when transitioning to government care, AHS evaluated my care needs at 6.6 hours per day. This is wholly inadequate for even the most basic tasks. It is impossible to function in a dignified way with only 6.6 hours of time to live his life." Given that I hope this is something that both sides of the House can agree on, will the minister agree that disabled Albertans deserve better and ensure that no Albertan ever has to experience treatment like this again?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
We believe every Albertan deserves the care and treatment that they need provided in a timely fashion. So in addition to investing over $1 billion over 3 years to improve the capacity and the services that we're providing to Albertans, we are actually, as of April 1st, having new regulations coming into force, which actually allows more self-direction, more autonomy for how those dollars are spent. So, Mr. Speaker, I also have the ability to say that the Aging with Dignity bilateral agreement is coming close to fruition as well.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Given that Carly Drew joined me earlier today and said, and I quote, "The care insecurity crisis demands our collective attention. Non-disabled is a temporary state, and a robust home care system is the only sustainable, ethical, and economical path forward. I can access MAID, but not the care I need to survive." To the minister. Will they listen to Carly and the countless others who are suffering without proper care and act to ensure that they don't feel MAID is their only viable option?
Minister.
We absolutely want to make sure that every Albertan, regardless of what their level of care needs are, that those are being met. It is the reason why we are increasing the total envelope in this area from $860 million or to $860 million, which is an increase of $27 million. This translates into more people, more resources, more supports for those who need it the most, Mr. Speaker. Of course we care. All of us care. Every person in this place cares about Albertans who need this care.
Here, here. Order, order, order. The Honourable Member for Lacombe-Panoka has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Highway 12 is one of our main east to west thoroughfares and sees heavy local as well as commercial traffic. Beginning at the Saskatchewan border and heading west all the way to Saskatchewan River crossing, this highway spans the entire length of my riding. Given the critical work needed for Highway 12 east of Lacombe to Clive, to the Minister of Transportation, can the Minister inform my constituents of the proposed plan for resurfacing this important length of highway?
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The highlight of any elected representative's career should be what they can do for their constituents. And I'm happy to work with a member from Lacombe-Panoka on priority projects for her people, Mr. Speaker. And actually, Highway 12 is in this year's construction plan for 15 kilometres of paving from Highway 815 to Highway 50, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue to work with all members of this House to deliver important priority projects for all Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Lacombe-Panoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given Highway 604 in Lacombe-Panoka was first commissioned for grading, base and full paving in 2008 for 11 kilometres, given work was only ever partially done and remains incomplete to this day, despite being a high-traffic road and critical for local and provincial traffic, and given this highway not only serves a gravel quarry, construction, intensive livestock and other agricultural operations, but also local and visitor access to lake recreation. To the Minister of Transportation, what can you tell the constituents of Lacombe-Panoka about future plans for Highway 604 completion and maintenance?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Highway 604 has been approved in this budget for design and engineering. Once the design and engineering permits have been finalized, Mr. Speaker, this project will be ready to tender for construction. But, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the NDP when it comes to roads. Their old leader has an $80 billion legacy debt that's making it hard to afford to build any new roads. Any of their new leadership candidates are talking about reducing the fuel tax to not fund any new roads. And the NDP federal leader, Mr. Speaker, is actually propping up Justin Trudeau for another year and a half, and an environment minister who wants to build no new roads in this country, Mr. Speaker. We're not.
The Honourable Member for Lacombe-Panoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given Highway 2, otherwise known as the QE2, is by far the most used and dangerous highway in our province, seeing at its busiest portions over 170,000 vehicles a day, given the instances of high-speed collisions, particularly at intersections and exit ramps along the highway, like the 604 highway crossing. To the Minister of Transportation, could you explain what work is being done to ensure that QE2 and its intersections remain safe and well-maintained?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Highway 2 is actually undertaking a planning and design study to consider upgrade options, also an interchange ramp modifications and removal at all at-grade intersections, Mr. Speaker. But we are building the province of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, with 64,000 lane kilometres and nearly 5,000 bridges. Budget 24 actually has $3.3 billion in transportation and economic corridor priorities, 42% increase, Mr. Speaker, over a 10-year average of road and bridge funding, $900 million to municipalities across the province to help for road, bridge, transit, and water treatment programs, Mr. Speaker. We are building Alberta.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton West, Henday.
Parents in Edmonton West Henday are worried about their kids' access to schools in their own neighbourhood. Overcrowded schools, long bus rides, a lack of resources are these ingredients for a thriving education system. The recent budget was an opportunity for this UCP government to fund schools that are so desperately needed. Instead, per-student funding in this province has sunk to the lowest in the country.
Shame.
Does the UCP realize what a mess they've made?
The Honourable Minister of Education has risen.
Mr. Speaker, one of the critical things that is essential in delivering a world-class education is to have new and updated and modernized schools. When the NDP were in office, they added no new school projects to the list in 2015 and 2016. All they did was continue the work that the previous PC government put in place. That being said, Mr. Speaker, in Budget 24, we have planned to move forward with 14 new school projects for the City of Edmonton. Collectively, that will add about 12,000 spaces for those families, Mr. Speaker.
The order, the Honourable Member for Edmonton West Henday.
Given that Bishop David Motuk and David Thomas King schools, both built by NDP government, have both been over capacity for years now, servicing a growing corner of Edmonton. And given that the Rosenthal K-6 school only received funding for planning in 2023, but what we really need now is shovels in the ground. My constituents are worried that this school will end up being yet another letdown from this
Order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton West Henday is the only one with the call.
My constituents are worried that this school will end up being yet another letdown from this government. Can this minister please ensure my constituents that Rosenthal K-6 will be built, and how long until it opens?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to reassure the members' constituents that we take projects in the members' riding very seriously, unlike the NDP who did not advance any projects there. Mr. Speaker, in Budget 24, we have provided design funding for Edmonton Public Schools for a new elementary school in Rosenthal. We are absolutely committed to that project moving forward. Once the design work has been completed, that project will then be eligible to receive full construction funding in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, we are moving these projects forward for the members' constituents and all Edmontonians.
The honourable member for Edmonton West Henday.
Given that almost every Catholic and public school in Edmonton is over capacity, and given that this shouldn't come as news to this government, since our side of the House has been raising the alarm on overcapacity for years, given that our students are our future and they deserve access to world-class public schools in their own neighborhoods, does the other side of the House agree? When will they actually start adequately funding our school system in Edmonton, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
We absolutely do agree in the importance of schools and delivering a world-class education, which is why in this budget we are advancing 14 projects in the Edmonton metropolitan region that will add 12,000 additional spaces. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? We would be able to build a lot more schools if the NDP didn't rack up debt when they were in office. Currently, we're spending over $3 billion annually on debt servicing costs alone, Mr. Speaker. That can build a lot more schools. We are absolutely committed to building schools while at the same time keeping our finances in order.
Hear, hear.
The order. The honourable member for Camrose is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. St. Mary's Hospital is the pride of the city of Camrose. It serves thousands who live in central Alberta, many of whom are my constituents. This is a pivotal hospital as it serves a wide region which contains many aging communities. St. Mary's features 3 operating rooms, but in the past it lacked the funding to run all but one of them. Recently, more funds were allocated, but those funds have not yet been released by AHS. Can the Minister of Health expand on what red tape is preventing the funds from being released and how she is working to remove it?
Honourable the Minister of Health has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member. St. Mary's Health Centre is an essential Covenant Health-run facility that serves many rural regions. Like other Covenant sites, they have access to capital maintenance and renewal programming funding through a yearly provincial prioritization process. So during the last 2 years, over $10.5 million in capital maintenance and renewal program funding has been allocated to St. Mary's Hospital, which includes critical upgrades to the operating rooms to improve patient flow, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. It's expected to be completed in 2025.
The honourable member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the answer. Given that St. Mary's Hospital experienced flooding, which damaged 55% of the building, and given that the staff continue to move forward in a very positive way, working around the restorations, and further given the age of the building and the importance of offering surgeries in rural Alberta, particularly in aging communities, can the Minister explain how the government is aiding to get these essential hospitals in full working order?
Minister of Health.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. St. Mary's Hospital is maintained through Covenant Health's dedicated maintenance staff who are engaged with Alberta Health Services to ensure they can escalate preservation priorities and initiatives. So AHS also visits the site and other central zone facilities to provide annual assessments and fair reviews. All preservation projects are implemented according to the priorities and funding availabilities. And Mr. Speaker, flood remediation is nearly complete, and in fact, AHS technical lead has advised it is expected to be complete by April of this year.
Honourable member.
Thank you to the Minister for the answer. Given that our government is focused on providing high-quality health care for Albertans, and given that the wonderful staff at St. Mary's Hospital are improving surgery outcomes for patients by using robotic-assisted machinery, can the Minister of Health explain whether her ministry plans on expanding the use of state-of-the-art technologies to provide better orthopedic surgeries in communities like mine and across rural Alberta?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member. Our government is committed to ensuring Albertans receive world-class health care where and when they need it. Mr. Speaker, we are very supportive of new innovative technologies, and we welcome the opportunity to add their value to our healthcare workforce. I am happy to say that St. Mary's Hospital is incorporating new state-of-the-art technologies for orthopedic surgeries, and I'm excited to look at how we can expand this use across all the zones and across the province. Mr. Speaker, there are incredible things happening in Alberta in this realm, and I'm excited to share it with all Albertans.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Calgary-Buffalo has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact on our province's art scene. The Fringe Festival in Edmonton is the highlight of the city's festival season. It brings artists together from across the globe and is the largest festival in North America. It is essential that this government does everything it can to protect this festival and provide sustaining funding so it's around for future generations. So to the Minister, what exactly is the government doing to protect Edmonton's world-renowned International Fringe Festival?
The Honourable the Minister of Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've previously said in this House, the Fringe Festival is a staple of Edmonton's festival scene, which brings together Albertans from around the province to celebrate the performing arts. We learnt of the financial challenges the Fringe Festival is having and are pleased to hear some of the variety of options that they're looking at to bring in more funding. They've reached out to me and I have an open door policy and we'll be meeting with them soon. And we've been pleased to provide them with over $2.5 million since 2019 through the Alberta Foundation for the Arts and Community Grant Programs.
The honourable member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, given that yesterday was World Theatre Day, despite the fact that no one from the UCP mentioned it, and given that theatres are struggling because the UCP's disregard for keeping life affordable, making cut after cut, hiking costs, and pushing Albertans, including artists, into an affordability crisis. And given that this government cut the AFA over the last 5 years, so even with the UCP promises for their budget to artists, they will still be $13 million short. So to the Minister, is Alberta's art scene facing death by 1,000 cuts, or will this government step in and provide more support?
The Honourable the Minister of Arts and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad the member opposite brought up theatre again. Budget 2024, if passed, will provide historic funding to Arts Commons in Calgary with over $103 million over 7 years for the transformation project. This historic investment in the arts shows our commitment to supporting the arts and cultural sectors, which will make arts accessible for all Albertans, expand our province's economy, and bring in more tourism. This government supports the arts like no other.
Honourable member.
You're still shorting AFA. Given that so many of Alberta's talented artists identify as members of the 2SL LGBTQIA+ community, some of whom sat in the gallery yesterday, and given that this government is actively pursuing policies that make them feel unsafe and unwelcome in our province, and given that Alberta artists Tegan and Sarah expressed profound concern that this government's harmful anti-trans policies, these policies are taking us back in time. So to the Minister, quote, are you 10 years ago? Will she take a look at this policy, quote, and call it off?
The Honourable the Minister of Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was pleased to watch the Junos a few days ago and see the amazing celebration of arts and music artists across our country. And our government is proud to continue to support the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, to which in my mandate letter to the Alberta Foundation of the Arts, I prioritize that they focus on diversity, inclusion, and representing a wide variety of Alberta artists from all backgrounds.
Order, 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 order. The honourable member for Calgary Glenmore's the only one with the call.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the Minister why the UCP is singling out renewables in the name of liabilities while they let $260 billion in oil and gas liabilities grow. Apparently, he's still waiting for the Liberal government to send him the $137 million meant for Indigenous communities. Sadly, though, the UCP failed to spend funding for well cleanup on Indigenous lands during COVID and must return the money. Why is the Minister making excuses instead of mandating the AER to clean up these wells?
Good question. Order, order, order. The Honourable the Minister of Energy and Minerals.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to let the member know, first of all, that we stand with Albertans. We stand with Indigenous communities. When they approached my ministry and said, listen, we have this $135 million from the federal government that's sitting in our bank account waiting to be spent on cleaning up their obligations, that's federal obligations on First Nations land, we need that money, and we need that money to get people to work. Mr. Speaker, we stood right beside them, and you know what they said? They said partnership. They said trust in describing this government and this premier, Mr. Speaker. That's a lot more than those people can ever say about anything they've done on the front job.
Order. The honourable member for Calgary-Glenmore.
Given that the Auditor General asked the government to address pipeline liabilities, $30 billion, given that oil and gas liabilities are festering and the Premier and her Utilities Minister banned renewables in the name of liabilities, and given that oil sands liabilities have roughly increased by 40% and the Environment Minister does not have it as a priority, and the hypocrisy of this government is not lost on anyone, will the Minister mandate the AER to address all liabilities, yes or no?
The Honourable the Minister of Energy has risen.
Mr. Speaker, we continuously look at all issues of liability that affect the people of Alberta. That's what's called good management. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know what their management style was. Sending a letter to billionaires across the world and saying, come on in, come to Alberta, and you know what, dig and put in open pit mines in Category 2 lands, Mr. Speaker. That's greenfield lands. That's not going to happen under this government, Mr. Speaker. We're going to listen to Albertans. We're going to make sure we do what's in the best interest of Albertans, and we're going to manage the liability file that they neglected to do when they were in power, Mr. Speaker.
The order. The honourable member for Edmonton, Calgary-Glenmore.
Given that the Energy Minister told us yesterday that everyone is happy with the Alberta Energy Regulator, given that I don't think the Minister realized the job of the regulator is to regulate and to protect public interest, given that rural municipalities and Indigenous communities and more have stated publicly they are not happy with the AER, will the Minister listen, learn from the distrust people have in the AER and commit to mandating the AER to address liabilities?
The Honourable the Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, we have a great regulator. We have great Albertans working for that regulator. And, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. When they were in charge of this government, they let the AER management run a scheme against the taxpayers of Alberta, using money against taxpayers and taking that money for their own profit. Mr. Speaker, they're gone. So's the NDP. Let's hope neither one of them ever come back.
Order. The honourable member for Airdrie East has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've long stood in this House advocating for the healthcare needs of my constituents. Albertans are moving to Airdrie in greater numbers than ever before, and our current healthcare facility is totally inadequate for the people who call Airdrie home. Thankfully, this government has prioritized over $8 million to renovate our current urgent care facility. Could the Minister of Health please give us an update on these renovations?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, and to the member for her advocacy. Our government is committed to the Airdrie Urgent Care Centre renovations, and I'm pleased to say that this project will occur over 3 phases: the development of the new community clinical services, development of expanded urgent care centre, and development of new administration and home care space. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work with AHS and project managers to complete the 3-phase renovation project by summer of 2025 so that Airdrie can better serve its growing community.
Member for Airdrie East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for her hard work in my constituency. Given that these necessary renovations to our urgent care centre have started back up, and given that this centre will need further investment and expansion to meet population growth pressures, can the Minister of Health please update my constituents on the proposal being put forward by One Health and Qualico communities to meet the needs of my constituents?
Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta Health has approved a grant agreement with One Health Associate Medical Airdrie Incorporated to develop their business case of a co-located primary and urgent care services model in Airdrie. So One Health will work with contracted resource providers provided by the province to support any necessary community engagement, writing and development of the business plan. Mr. Speaker, a request for proposal to support this work is ongoing, and it is anticipated the contract will be awarded in April of this year.
The honourable member for Airdrie East.
Mr. Speaker, given that we're very excited for this news, but many of my constituents are currently forced to drive into Calgary in order to visit a hospital during a serious medical emergency. And further, given that the people of Airdrie were promised a plan in the last budget to address a need for a standalone hospital, can the minister please update us on the progress so far?
The Minister.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government recognizes the unique challenges families in Airdrie do face when accessing health care services in their communities, and we want to ensure that every Albertan can access the care where and when they need it. Mr. Speaker, AHS recently submitted a major capital needs assessment for health capital projects to Alberta Health, which outlines the Airdrie Community Health Centre redevelopment. I look forward to seeing this move forward, and I just want to take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy and blessed Easter as we move forward.
Honourable members, that concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In 30 seconds or less, we'll continue with the remainder of the daily routine. That's Heather.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions, notices of motions, introduction of bills.
The Honourable Member for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud today to request leave to introduce Bill 206, Child and Youth Advocate, Parent and Guardian Advisor Amendment Act 2024. This bill will establish a parent and guardian advisor within the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate to provide parents and guardians invaluable support, relevant information and guidance, and a compassionate outlet for addressing concerns related to their children's well-being. It would also mandate an annual report on the systemic issues affecting parents and guardians regarding their children, revealing key insights on the challenges they face. It is, Mr. Speaker, an honor to have a second chance to put forward a private member's bill. I look forward to discussing this bill further with my colleagues on both sides of the House, and I hope to work closely with the other side to obtain unanimous support like I did with my first bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the Honourable Member for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul has moved first reading of Bill 206, Child and Youth Advocate, Parent and Guardian Advisor Amendment Act 2024. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? If so, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. The motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 206, Child and Youth Advocate, Parent and Guardian Advisor Amendment Act 2024 is now read a first time.
The Honourable Member for Cypress, Medicine Hat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to request leave to introduce a bill being Bill PR2, Community Foundation of Medicine Hat and Southeastern Alberta Amendment Act 2024. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat has moved first reading of Bill PR2, Community Foundation of Medicine Hat and Southeastern Alberta Amendment Act 2024. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? If so, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill PR2, Community Foundation of Medicine Hat and Southeastern Alberta Amendment Act 2024 is now read a first time.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwoods, on behalf of the Member for Edmonton Rutherford, to move first reading of PR3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I rise to request leave on behalf of the Member for Edmonton Rutherford to introduce a bill being Bill PR3, Providence Renewal Centre Amendment Act 2024. Thank you.
Honourable Members, the Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwoods has moved first reading of Bill PR3, Providence Renewal Center Amendment Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? If so, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill PR3, Providence Renewal Center Amendment Act 2024 is now read a first time.
The honourable member for Livingston-McLeod.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to request leave to introduce a bill being Bill PR4, Rosebud School of the Arts Amendment Act 2024. Thank you.
Members, the honourable member for Livingston-McLeod has moved first reading of Bill PR4, Rosebud School of the Arts Amendment Act 2024. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? If so, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill PR4, Rosebud School of the Arts Amendment Act 2024 is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
The member for Calgary-Falconridge has a tabling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to table 5 copies of an email which is being sent by Alberta Lively Protection Society to the Minister to show them that they have registered their society.
Member for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Thank you. I'd like to table 5 copies of an article entitled False Equivalencies Are Hurting the Housing Conversation, published today in the Calgary Herald and written by the member from Edmonton Highlands Norwood. That's me.
Are there others? The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would table the requisite copies of a petition gathered by Friends of Medicare of approximately 33,000 Albertans calling on the government to improve the quality and availability of home care services in this province.
Yeah. Are there others? The honourable member for Edmonton-McClung.
Table 5 requisite copies today of an article in Lakeland Today, which I referenced, whereby the Cold Lake Mayor speaks out about Highway 28 funding concerns and the fact that it has been in obvious need of upgrades for well over a decade.
The honourable member for St. Albert is rising.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I have 2 tablings. First is an email, March 28, to the Minister of Service Alberta from Dr. Giordana Coulthard about the failure of Bill 12 to help those who lost their life savings. My second is an email, from October 23, again, that explains that life leases in question are not being investigated, as was explained in this House earlier this week.
Are there others? Seeing none.
Tablings to the clerk, deferred divisions.
Honourable members, prior to going to points of order, I'd just like to make a very brief statement as a reminder that my office sent out an email yesterday. I'm sure it was read by all, but I wanted to remind everyone that this next week, being a constituency week, the Assembly will proudly host a group of future parliamentarians who are participating in the Girl Guides Alberta Girls Parliament. As part of their visit to the legislature, they'll be entering into the chamber, sitting at your desks. They will hear a presentation from the clerk. While your desks will be locked and your personal items remain safe, I ask that you please do your best to clear the tops of your desks of any bills, notes, or otherwise that you would prefer to not be there. I appreciate your cooperation and your support to the Legislative Assembly staff in this regard. That brings us to points of order. And at 2:01, the official opposition House Leader rose on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, at 2:01, I rose on a point of order against the Minister of Service Alberta. Under 23H, I and J, H makes allegations against another member. I impedes false and unavowed motives to another member, and J uses abusive and insulting language of a nature likely to create disorder. In the back and forth between the Minister of Service Alberta and his critic at one point, and I do not have the benefit of the blues, but I believe I have recorded his language accurately. The minister said, when there's heavy lifting to be done, you can't find St. Albert or Falconridge anywhere. Mr. Speaker, along with 23 HI and J, I would draw your attention to House of Commons Procedures and Practice, Chapter 13, Rules of Order and Decorum, page 623, unparliamentary language, where it begins with the proceedings of the House are based on a long-standing tradition of respect for the integrity of all members, and goes on to say personal attacks, insults, and obscenities are not in order. Earlier on page 619, it also states, remarks which question a member's integrity, honesty, or character are not in order, and a member will be requested to withdraw offensive remarks, allegations, or accusations of impropriety. The language, when there's heavy lifting to be done, you can't find St. Albert or Falcon Ridge anywhere, can only be considered an insult, Mr. Speaker, unparliamentary, and should be beneath a minister of this crown. Now, we got to this language, Mr. Speaker, because when asked why he's brought forward inadequate legislation, the minister has taken to repeatedly suggesting that because the critic didn't attend a meeting that the minister didn't invite him to, that the minister couldn't possibly have gotten the legislation right. It's a terrible argument, but it's his right to make it, and I do agree that the bill would have been better had he engaged and listened to the NDP critic or even the people impacted by the contents of the bill. He continued to make this argument. I don't have, and it isn't unparliamentary for him to state that the critic wasn't at a particular meeting that he wasn't invited to, but to suggest that when there's heavy lifting to be done, you can't find the two members that the member from the Minister of Service Alberta tends to repeatedly insult is unparliamentary. He should apologize and withdraw. I would suggest the minister also use a different tactic in the debate on this matter, but I certainly do not control that. I just hope that he will remain parliamentary in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm having a bit of deja vu. I think we had this conversation recently. And in my argument against this point of order, I will reference some of the comments that you, the chair, made with regards to the point of order. But I will first address the idea that insults, obscenities, or questioning a member's integrity were brought up here. Questioning a member's integrity would be to suggest that the Honourable Minister of Service Alberta came in this chamber and said the member from one constituency to another is a cheater or a liar. That would, of course, Mr. Speaker, be out of line. And nothing to that point was said. If you added an expletive before that, that would be an obscenity. Nothing to that point was said. And I believe that while the members opposite may not like the fact that the minister was suggesting that members were or were not present at public consultations, they may feel it's insulting and might hurt their feelings. I don't think it was necessarily an insult that rises to the level of a point of order, Mr. Speaker. And if I may reference, Mr. Speaker, your own comments with regards to a point of order that was raised on this similar topic not too long ago, you did say that I am sympathetic to the opposition House Leader's position that when the Honourable Minister of Service Alberta said the member would know all of this if he showed up for work, it becomes difficult to determine whether or not the work was a public meeting or was a meeting held in here in the chamber in the Assembly, which would, of course, raise to the level of a point of order. Now, without the benefit of the official blues, but unofficial record of my own, shall we say, I believe the minister said something to the effect of, but you know who is suspiciously absent from those conversations when referencing the 170 Albertans that the minister did consult on this bill, that he also even met with the NDP. Back to the quote, but you know who is suspiciously absent from those conversations? Member from St. Albert and the member from Falcon Ridge were nowhere to be found. Further on, why is it that any heavy lifting to be done, you can't find Falcon Ridge or St. Albert anywhere? That is, of course, Mr. Speaker, comment about what he may be or may not be hearing about their performance in their own constituencies when it comes to consulting on this matter. So, in conclusion of my arguments, I do believe that this is not a point of order. It is a matter of debate. Your comments, Mr. Speaker, were taken into consideration, I believe, by the Minister of Service Alberta when referencing this idea that it was in the chamber or not. I believe it was very clear. Nothing was said about the member's presence in this chamber. That would be a point of order. Thank you.
Are there other submissions? I am prepared to rule. I don't believe the largest submission from the opposition House Leader was with respect to the ruling on the presence or the absence of a member. I think it is quite clear what the honourable member for the Honourable Minister of Service Alberta was referring to with respect to the presence or absence of the conversations. I'm not convinced that that was the argument that the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader was making. And I agree that it isn't a point of order with respect to those remarks. Having said that, the substantive portion of the point of order was whether or not the allegations and the statements made by the Minister of Service Alberta were unparliamentary with respect to his comments about, but you know who was suspiciously absent from those conversations? St. Albert and Calgary Falconridge were nowhere to be found. Why is it that when there's heavy lifting to be done, you can't find Calgary Falconridge and St. Albert anywhere, which is from the benefit of the blues, of which, of course, I have. Honourable members, I would provide caution that when we make significantly more personal statements with respect to allegations, it is often when order. It's often when decorum deteriorates inside the chamber. With that in mind, members of the official opposition also make statements with respect to members of the government, particularly about why don't they care, the minister doesn't care, which I think sort of are along the same lines of the allegation made today. Those are rarely a point of order as such. I'll provide caution to the Minister of Service Alberta with respect to this. This has been the point of some contention over the past 2 days, and I'm sure that there's more effective, more parliamentary ways to make his point, but for now this is not a point of order. I consider the matter dealt with and concluded. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader rose at 2:05 and raised another point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At 2:05, the member from Edmonton South was asking a question about the South Edmonton Hospital. And often we do hear heckling in this chamber. I do not often call points of order when it comes to heckling. However, under 23H, I, and J, specifically J uses abusive or insulting language of a nature to create disorder. And I will not re-enter them into the record, but this does directly tie to Chapter 13, page 619, and Chapter 13, page 623, which I referenced in the previous point of order. The Minister of Municipal Affairs, as he often does when the member from Edmonton South is speaking, and I have noticed this is a bit of a pattern, Mr. Speaker, in this case, felt compelled that he must heckle, yell at her in quite a raised voice twice. They punished themselves when they elected you. A very direct insult intended towards an individual member that I think does raise to the point of order, Mr. Speaker. Yelling at another member in such a direct way while they're in the middle of asking a question and falling down to the point of disrespect and insult at this point, I would hope it would be ruled a point of order in this case, Mr. Speaker, as it has been against the official opposition, and we apologize and withdraw when it does. So I hope that this is ruled as a point of order, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's 2 points to this point of order that I will address. The first one would be that the Minister of Service Alberta, is Service Alberta, you said?
Municipal Affairs.
I apologize. Municipal Affairs. Minister of Municipal Affairs was directly heckling and often heckles an individual member, the one from Edmonton South. Mr. Speaker, I think it is a well-known fact that one of the longest-standing members of this chamber heckles everyone. In fact, sometimes even heckles me. It's a good time. But I would say there's no personal vendetta against the member from Edmonton South and from the Minister of Municipal Affairs. With regards to the alleged comments that were made, I did not hear them. I do believe that if those comments specifically were said to the member from Edmonton South, they would be a point of order, and I would ask the honourable member to withdraw and apologize. However, I did not hear them. I cannot comment on them. I take the opposition leader, the opposition House Leader, for what she's saying. I would never suggest that she's not being truthful with the chamber, but I didn't hear it. Therefore, I can't comment further.
There are others. Honourable members, I am prepared to rule, and I do agree with the official opposition House Leader that if he said those things, they would be unparliamentary. Unfortunately, some members of the Assembly took a very robust and vocal position today inside the chamber, and so it was difficult for the Speaker to hear on a number of occasions, and in this case as well. I have the benefit of the blues, of which there is no record of those statements being made. I cannot rule on statements I did not hear or there is no reliable record of, and in this case, that is the case, and so it is not a point of order. However, the Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs knows what he said. If he said it, he should apologize and withdraw, and we'll leave that to his devices to do so. I consider this matter dealt with and concluded. We are at orders of the day, orders du jour.
Government bills and orders for third reading. Bill 13, Appropriation. Bill 15, Appropriation Supplementary Supply Act 2024. Honourable Mr. Horner.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance and the President of Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege to rise today and move third reading of Bill 15, the Appropriation Supplementary Supply Act 2024. Bill 15 will provide authority for government to pay from the General Revenue Fund for additional costs that are not already covered or otherwise provided for during the current fiscal year. It includes $412.7 million in expense, $4.5 million in capital investment, and $304.1 million in financial transactions. The funding in Bill 15 will cover costs that reflect the government's commitment to strengthen and refocus our healthcare system, to ensure students are supported in classrooms, and to keep our communities and families safe. I ask again that the honourable members support this bill and help the government move forward with funding Albertans' priorities. Thank you. I now move to adjourn debate.
For the motion to adjourn debate, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried.
Under Government Bills and Orders for third reading, Bill 14, Appropriation Act 2024, the Honourable Mr. Horner.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and President of Treasury Board.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move third reading of Bill 14, the Appropriation Act 2024. Last month, I tabled Budget 2024, a responsible plan for a growing province. With this budget, we're investing even more to refocus our healthcare system and deliver better care. We're building more schools so our children and grandchildren continue to get the best education for years to come. We're focusing even more on job creation and investment attraction so Alberta maintains its position as Canada's economic engine. We are continuing to improve safety and security in our communities while responding to the needs of vulnerable populations. And we are saving for tomorrow and paying down the provincial debt so future generations are not on the hook for costly expenses. The funding amounts in Bill 14 will ensure the province has the resources to address Albertans' needs and maintaining Alberta's competitiveness so we can pave the way for more prosperity. Budget 2024's historic health investment of $26.2 billion will refocus our healthcare system while ensuring Albertans have the care they need. We're working to ensure every Albertan has access to a primary care provider, reduce emergency department, surgeries, and EMS wait times, provide fair, consistent, and timely access to continuing care services, and provide every Albertan struggling with addiction and/or mental health challenges with compassionate support. Budget 2024 continues investments into our classrooms. We're committed to welcoming more students and building more classrooms with $1.2 billion to address enrollment growth and $2.1 billion to build and modernize new schools where we see the biggest pressures. This means that 43 priority projects create 35,000 new and modernized spaces. Families, seniors, and vulnerable Albertans will have more help with $5.3 billion to improve the supports that make a difference. This includes fully funding AISH, the Alberta Seniors Benefit and Income Support Programs, with $2.9 billion. An increase to the Alberta Child and Family Benefit will help lower-income families with payments up to $3,641, a 9.6% increase. All Albertans deserve to feel secure in their communities. Budget 2024 invests in keeping our communities protected from natural threats like wildfire and drought. It also increases capacity in the province's court system, invests in crime prevention, and more recovery-oriented supports for at-risk Albertans. Budget 2024 maintains Alberta's competitive advantage so businesses and industry continue to create jobs, innovate, and thrive. A strong labor force keeps our economy moving. We remain committed to attracting skilled professionals and enabling entrepreneurs. Initiatives like the Alberta is Calling Attraction Bonus and the Film and Television Tax Credit are investments that will benefit Alberta's economic future. Municipalities shape our communities and contribute to our economic prosperity. It's why an additional $60 million through the new Local Growth and Sustainability Grant Program will advance infrastructure projects where there has been increased pressures. Projects will boost the community and benefit our overall economy. Budget 2024 secures Alberta's future by staying true to responsible fiscal management. It makes targeted investments to support Albertans today and tomorrow. It maintains our commitment to our fiscal framework. We have a balanced budget with sustainable spending decisions. We will continue to stick to this fiscal plan so we can create more opportunities for Albertans to get ahead. Madam Speaker, Budget 2024, a responsible plan. It's a budget for today and tomorrow. I ask that all members of this House support this bill so we can support Albertans today and make sure they are supported in the future. Thank you.
Are there others that wish to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Southwest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today to speak to Bill 14, the Appropriations Act of 2024. And as I mentioned in Bill debate yesterday, Madam Speaker, Alberta is at a crossroads where the decisions we make in this Assembly will affect Albertans for generations. And if we make the right decisions now, in 2024, I'm confident that Alberta stands to be the inclusive, prosperous province I know it is and can be and remain a destination of opportunity for newcomers. However, I must say, Madam Speaker, that the Appropriation Act, Bill 14 specifically, but also this budget, simply does not reflect these priorities. And frankly, budgets are about priorities. The government must make the choices that will enable Alberta to adapt to the ever-changing global economy. And in this specific act, this means proper investments in public education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, and economic diversification. I don't see that, Madam Speaker. It simply is inadequate to meet the challenges that Albertans face. Instead, I see a budget full of broken promises. This budget is not built on the foundation that will deal with the major issues that is facing Alberta. As I mentioned yesterday, Albertans face serious challenges today and will continue to face them for years to come. And yet this budget falls short in helping both current and future generations of Albertans. As I've mentioned many times in this House, we are facing the worst affordability crisis in a generation, with inflation at its worst since the 1980s. Many of my constituents have spoken to me about their utility bills, and as I'm sure many of my colleagues in this House have heard as well from their constituents. So many of them are wondering how they can afford to pay next month's utility bills and put food on the table. Meanwhile, Alberta's unemployment rate is creeping higher and higher, with real GDP per capita stagnating. And in a double whammy, the government isn't keeping up in providing much-needed public services and investment in infrastructure. And let me just say that the government is being short-sighted by not investing properly in the healthcare infrastructure that we need, in the schools that we need, in the community infrastructure and funding to municipalities that we need. Because ultimately what will end up happening is it will end up costing Albertans more. It might look like fiscal prudence currently, but ultimately these delayed costs will end up costing all of us more. And instead, the government isn't delivering any plan to fix the chaotic mess in our healthcare system or the crushing pressures in our school. And Madam Speaker, it also misses many opportunities to set Alberta up for the future and to changes to global economic conditions. It fails, this budget fails to make the right investments in productivity, and it fails to make the right investments in economic diversification. Let me just take a moment to focus specifically on affordability, because I think the Appropriation Act also fails in this regard. The government needs to keep more money in Albertans' pockets at a time when families need help the most. And yet, not only did the Premier replace her promised tax credit with a suite of new ways to make life more expensive, there also just isn't enough supports. Let me just reiterate what this government is doing, just some of the sweets, some of the new ways that this government has introduced has actually implemented to make Albertans' lives just more expensive. They're increasing fees to buy a home. This government is also taxing owners of electric vehicles. They're increasing tuition fees for university and college students. They're increasing hospital parking fees, of all things, and making it harder to find affordable childcare. There is nothing in this budget to help Albertans afford day-to-day life, and what there is simply not enough. And instead, what this budget and what this specific act does, it makes life more difficult for Albertans. Let me also focus on schools and healthcare. The government's priorities for the economy are also out of touch with families and the struggles they face now, as I mentioned. But let me just talk a little bit about schools. For years, the public and Catholic school boards, as well as Francophone and other school divisions, have told this government that new schools were needed yesterday. And while, as the MLA for Edmonton Southwest, as the member for Edmonton Southwest, I'm certainly happy to see that there is a new high school announced for full construction. It simply is not enough, and it should have been announced in previous budgets. Many schools in my riding are at over 100% utilization, and this Appropriation Act and this bill simply does not address the need in my riding and frankly across the province in many, many growing ridings and new neighborhoods. I just want to point out specifically that the Edmonton Public School Board's utilization rate for schools across the city will creep up to closer and closer to nearly 100% in just a few years. By 2033, Edmonton Public Schools, as an example, will actually be projected to welcome 176,000 students. That's an incredible increase from 122,000 students currently. And that pace of growth will only hasten. As I've mentioned to some of my colleagues before, school divisions are struggling. It is not unreasonable for Albertans and for parents to expect that their children will have a desk to sit at in school, that they will have the necessary supports to succeed, that they will have the necessary attention from teachers and educational assistants. But when you have a class of 37 children, for example, the quality of instruction, quality of education is going to suffer no matter how good a teacher is. And that's the reality that we're seeing in a lot of these schools. And I'm very concerned, Madam Speaker, that with this budget, it doesn't do enough to ensure that students who need individual attention the most, those that require specialized supports, students with special needs, or English language learners, will receive the necessary additional supports that they require. Madam Speaker, there is always a cost. much of this is preventable, and as long as the government is willing to make the investments and fund classroom spaces and staffing, we can ensure that children will not fall behind. But in this bill, it falls short. Classrooms will continue to be short-staffed and remain incredibly overcrowded. There are currently 28,000 additional students entering our schools every single year across the province. And with the announcements that we've seen so far in terms of new schools that we're building, it simply isn't enough. Instead, this government has taken Alberta from being one of the top provinces when it comes to per student funding to, in fact, the worst. And there is nothing in this bill that changes that. The weighted moving average continues to underfund new and growing divisions. It continues to inadequately provide for the complexities in the classrooms. And I can't help but think of the many families that I serve in Edmonton Southwest who are also sending their kids on very, very long bus rides because there aren't schools nearby. And so while this government lauds itself on funding schools, and while the government says that there is a process, the reality is that process is a way at times to hide behind the inadequacies and failures of this government. And what I would say is, and what I would say to members in this House is really think about the families and think about the students that at the end of the day aren't receiving the adequate supports that they need to succeed. This budget simply isn't enough. Funding a school or two for the second largest school division simply isn't enough. We need, all Albertans need, adequate, sustainable funding and investment in school infrastructure. And Madam Speaker, as I consider the Appropriation Act and think about the budget, I have to say that I'm deeply disappointed that the government isn't doing enough. They might laud themselves and say we're doing something for kids who need that support. We're building some schools. But if you consider that over the last several years there have actually been precipitous cuts to education, and the funding has not been commensurate with the growth in the number of students. And if you consider that, frankly, even by increasing the budget nominally, it isn't enough to address the growth in student population. There's another thing I also want to address, Madam Speaker, and that is the need for family doctors. Many of my constituents have written to me about their struggles of finding a family doctor, including a new mother recently that had written to me because she couldn't find a pediatrician for her 2-week-old baby. And this government, that's one example. This government is refusing to increase funding for acute care, to increase staffing in our struggling healthcare system. We see that in the budget. And that is impacting disproportionately the many young families who are moving to Edmonton Southwest and to other new and growing neighborhoods across our province. Madam Speaker, there is so much to be desired in this budget. I certainly hope that my colleagues across the aisle would reconsider some of the gaps, and as it currently stands, I will not be able to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Others to join the debate, the Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to Bill 14 and the budget that we have in front of us from the UCP. Now, the Minister of Finance, in moving this reading of the bill, he spoke of this as a responsible plan for a growing province, Madam Speaker. He talked about how it is responding to the needs of vulnerable populations. Madam Speaker, I would respectfully disagree. Here, representing the communities at the heart of our city in Edmonton, Edmonton City Centre, we have seen the impacts of the doubling of the number of people in our city who are living without housing. And indeed, the challenges for those that are living houseless is something that we have been seeing here for years. And so for myself, as a representative for this area, I am the representative for a number of these people who live without housing, who live on our streets, who stay in our shelter system. And I've seen the impacts on our communities and the challenges that this has created. Now, what we have here in this budget, which the minister calls a responsible plan for a growing province, which he says responds to the needs of vulnerable people. On page 86 of the fiscal plan, we have a note that there is what they call significant additional funding of $24.5 million, $70 million over the next 3 years for the ongoing implementation of their homelessness task force action plan. Funding will be used, it says, to add hundreds of new homeless shelter spaces, as well as to support operational cost pressures at shelters throughout the province. Now, if we take a look at that plan, Madam Speaker, the homelessness task force plan, at various points that plan talks about funding shelters to help facilitate access to appropriate housing options through housing-focused shelter services. Under building successes, that action plan talks about establishing over 1,200 units of housing with supports offered on-site. Supportive housing, Madam Speaker. And it talks about that housing being successful, how it has made substantial reductions in the folks that live in that housing and their use of emergency public services, including 58% fewer days in hospital, 91% fewer days in jail, compared to a year before they were housed. But you know what this budget does not fund, Madam Speaker? More supportive housing. It takes one piece of that action plan, invests in more shelter spaces. Now, to be clear, Madam Speaker, I am not disagreeing with investment in shelter spaces. Those are needed. Indeed, the City of Edmonton, myself, my colleagues, called for years for this government to step up to the table in funding more shelter spaces. What we saw continually, winter after winter, was a pattern where this government would be late to the game, last to the table, and not bring enough. We were scrambling at the last minute for shelter spaces, the City of Edmonton having to step up, find additional spaces, fund additional spaces, fund additional services, while the provincial government dragged its feet. Now, I will give them credit, Madam Speaker. This past winter, we finally saw them step up. Now again, we did not see those shelter spaces get open until a couple of months into the winter season, but I will give them credit. They stepped up and they provided the funding to get us over 1,700 shelter spaces this winter. So that is progress, and that is important. That is a vital part of this, but it is not enough on its own, Madam Speaker. Over the last few years, the City of Edmonton has built 210 new units of supportive housing. And that is essential because, again, this government's own action plan states access to appropriate housing options that are combined with health and social supports remains challenging. They published that in September of 2022, Madam Speaker. But with this budget, we do not see any additional investment in supportive housing here in the City of Edmonton, despite the fact that we know that is an essential part of this system. So again, the city has invested 210 new units of supportive housing over the last few years, almost exclusively funded by the city, with funding from the federal government. The UCP government repeatedly refused to partner or even just to commit to funding the wraparound services which fall under provincial responsibility, the provision of health supports, mental health supports, social services. Year over year over year, Madam Speaker, this government refused to fund that small portion while the City of Edmonton stepped up, while the federal government stepped up to actually provide mid- and long-term solutions here in our communities. Indeed, I've had people that work across sectors, people in business, people that work from the city side, people that work from the social service side, that said even just bringing up the words supportive housing with this government's ministers pretty much killed the conversation. But the fact is, Madam Speaker, as this government admitted themselves in their homelessness task force action plan, it is an essential part. So in this budget, we have funding for more shelter spaces. We have funding for the operation of those shelter spaces. The government brags and talks about how important it is that they are providing the navigation center here downtown to help people find housing. But we know from the minister's own estimates that through that navigation center, we have housed a total of 5 people. And that is because this government is not investing in the next step, the essential step, that transitional housing, that supportive housing. So that is one of my concerns with this budget. And I'll have more to say on that at a future opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are others to join the debate. The honourable member for Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just need to be reminded about what we're speaking to.
We are on Bill 14, the Appropriation Act.
I was ready to talk about Bill 15, but I like Bill 14 better because I got more to say about that one. No, I'm good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. I did want to just bring back, if I could, tie in some pieces that were really important to me when we think about the Appropriations Act. What I really thought was interesting was we had a renewable energies ban in this this past few months, and when that happened, the government knew they were putting handcuffs on the industry, and they knew they drove investment away. And so the results with that renewable energy ban, which was extended for months, said to the world, we are not open for business here for certain types of technology. And that was harming for Albertans. And so when I thought about what would be in the Appropriations Act, I thought this was an opportunity for the government to say, look, we needed to go look at how we're using our land in this province. We needed to address some issues that have been brought up to us. We want to say back to the world and investment that we're open for investment, and in fact, here's what our renewable energy program is. Here's how we're going to attract more investment to this province. We have heard talk about rooftop solar. We've heard talk about an energy efficiency program. And we see nothing in the Appropriations Act that provides any incentives to entice people to work on ways we could have more renewable energy in this province for our energy efficiency program. And when you go to the industry and you say, look, no, we're not going to be open for business, a great thing to do is to basically offer incentives to bring back.
Good question. Order. Yeah. If honourable members would like to have a conversation, I maybe ask that they leave this chamber and do it so that I can hear the honourable member for Sherwood Park speaking.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Almost every state in North America has an energy efficiency program. We're so caught up on betting on
Telling women to smile.
Whoa, yeah. We're so caught up on betting on elections in this province that we can't focus on our own house and what we need to do. In the previous UCP government, they bet on the last presidential election with a $1.5 billion bet on a pipeline extension. Betting on elections is not a strategy that is worthy of a provincial government in Alberta. Currently, we have a government that is betting on a federal election in this country and a change in the federal government. They are wailing about the carbon tax and saying, oh my, this is so terrible. And then at the same time, they're going, we're going to have a carbon neutral economy by 2050. And in this Appropriations Act, there is nothing that is connected to a carbon neutral economy in 2050. And so we had a renewable energy ban, and now we have this opportunity to basically provide incentives for that achievement of carbon neutral economy, and there is nothing in the Appropriations Act. When I looked to Texas, they have state incentives. When I looked to Arizona, they have state incentives. Even Montana has state incentives. Every jurisdiction in North America at the provincial or state level has incentives for an energy efficiency program, which would include what we call in this province microgeneration, or rooftop solar is the largest type of technology used in that. And we need to bring forward something like that with this act in order to get support from this side of the House. How am I doing for? Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm done with that. I have to say on that piece.
The honourable member for Calgary Elbow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is bad. This bill is very bad. We have in Alberta a massive affordability crisis, as many of my colleagues have stated. And the root of the affordability crisis, in many respects, is the fact that wages in Alberta have not kept up with inflation. This is the only province in Canada where the average ordinary working person has fallen behind inflation. The only large province in Canada where that has happened since 2019. Real nominal wage growth, leaving aside inflation, nominal wage growth in this province stands at 9.5% over the UCP's term since 2019. It's the lowest in Canada. We have the lowest wage growth in Canada, in this country, in this province. And what that means is that the current advantage that Albertans have of making more money than the rest of Canadians is constantly getting eroded. And there will be some time in the not too distant future, in the coming months, when we will not be able to say anymore that we make more money than everyone else does, because we won't be. And so for the people of Alberta who have lost ground to inflation by the tune of 5 percentage points, 5% real wage declines since 2019, it is extremely irritating to them to hear from the members of the government that everything is fine and that it's all in their heads and that this government is actually helping them when in fact it is not. What is the government doing to address this incredible suite of year after year after year of subpar wage growth in this country? Nothing but broken promises. The government offered tax cuts and then rescinded them. There's no mention in this budget, there is no money in this budget at any point in time for a key election promise that this government made in order to win the election. Housing construction fell last year. This province had fewer homes built in the last fiscal year than it did in the year before, and that is by this budget's own numbers. This budget's own numbers are saying that 180,000 more people will be moving to this province. Congratulations. Only 39,000 new homes are being constructed for them. So not only is housing a crisis for renters and for people who have few housing options, but it means more of people it means more people are going to be having their kids live in their basement for a very long time. It means that more families are going to be facing their kids-in-law moving back in, and more extended families having to stay extended rather than actually provide housing solutions and market housing solutions as well as affordable housing solutions. There is nothing in this budget that solves the housing crisis that is getting worse and worse and worse. Instead, this government is increasing land titles fees so that if you can afford to buy a house, they're going to increase your tax to buy that house by 168%, Madam Speaker. It is utterly unacceptable. And for that reason, I have to oppose this budget. I feel like it does nothing to help the people of Alberta, and I urge everybody in the House to vote against it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there others to join the debate? Seeing none, would the Honourable Minister of Finance like to close the debate?
Waive.
Honourable members, the Honourable President of Treasury Board and Minister of Finance has moved third reading of Bill 14, the Appropriation Act 2024. Those in favour of the motion for third reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. So carried.
Bill 14, Appropriation Act 2024 is now read a third time.
Go ahead.
Under Government Bills and Orders for third reading, Bill 15, Honourable Mr. Horner, adjourn debate.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, or anyone wishing to join the debate? Seeing none, would the Minister like to close the debate?
Waive.
Coop, do you want to do this? The Honourable President of Treasury Board, Minister of Finance, has moved third reading of Bill 15, the Appropriation Supplementary Supply Act 2024. Those in favour of the motion for third reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. So carried.
Bill 15, Appropriation Supplementary Supply Act 2024 is now read a third time.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. What a fantastic 3 weeks of work we've had in a row. But the time has come now as we prepare to get ready for Easter. I'm not sure why they're heckling the adjournment speech. It's odd. But in any event, I do appreciate the work of all members of this chamber over the past 3 weeks. I wish you all a very happy Easter as you have spent time with your friends and family and your constituents. But at this time, Madam Speaker, I move that we adjourn the Assembly until 1:30 p.m. Monday, April 8th.
Heard that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. House stands adjourned until April 8th. Happy Easter. Hold up.